we will see how the health of the pelvis is really determined by how this femur articulates in the socket or the hip joint. So how the hip joint affects the pelvic stability. Now the pelvis is not destabilized just laterally. It could happen posteriorly, anteriorly, laterally, and I'll show you the variations so that we have an understanding of it for our future classes. Let's say a person has hyperlordosis, where the arch of the lower back is more than what it needs to be. So here, when there is hyperlordosis, usually the lumbar overarches, pushing the ribcage forward, making the buttock or the hip jut back, which throws the sacrum out on a different plane, makes the lower back collapse, especially posteriorly, pushes the ribcage in front and makes the front of the abdomen not support the spine. It breaks the spine line. This is an anterior tilt where the back of the hip lifts up, pelvis lifts up, and the front of the pelvis drops down. Even I use the word hip now interchangeably. It should be corrected. It's the pelvis, where the back of the pelvis ascends up and the front of the pelvis descends down. Let's say a person loses lumbar lordosis. Then you will see that the hip tucks in more than necessary, where the anterior side of the pelvis lifts up, compressing the anterior face of the lumbar and abdomen. The pelvis drops at the back. This is a posterior tilt. So this can happen front and back, or it can happen laterally, where the left hip raises up and the right hip raises up, therefore tilting or making the centrality of the spine not exist. All this has to be corrected while doing an asana. I would like to emphasize that our body is an intricate, living, thriving system. So when we do an asana or any form of movement, or in this case yoga, we have to make sure that this immense intricacy of the body is actually honored. So when we do an asana, we have to make sure that this asana is honoring the body's natural homeostasis and the way in which the body needs to be positioned in its minutest form, and not just move into an asana as a physical design. Okay, so now casual standing. Very many times you'll see that we tend to stand like this, right? Or when we're listening or talking, we tend to stand like this, right? So all these are structural changes where over the course of time it creates a certain imbalance. These are lifestyle changes where we assume certain postures which can be destructive for us over time. Now let me show you how exactly this femur influences the pelvis, assuming that we stand like this, which is very common. We tend to listen like this, we tend to talk like this, we tend to stand like this, where we invite a certain pelvic tilt and push the femur from its natural alignment or articulation in the socket. Now let's say I'm standing on this block, and you should be careful when you try it. Make sure you have a wall support by you, or if you feel not so confident to do it on your own, please don't. You have to use your judgment. When we stand on a block, I'm placing one foot on the block and the other foot naturally hangs. Now, why does the other foot hang? You can see that when I'm standing in such a way that this hip is pushed out. When this hip is pushed out, where this femur is not articulating in the socket and is pushed out, the other leg tends to hang also away from the socket. This moves out laterally, this inferiorly drops down. So this leg drops down. Now if I want to correct this, and I just want to show you how a proper femoral alignment immediately takes care of this instability, I am thinking of bending this knee ever so slightly, as if I'm just cushioning the knee, just about that. While doing that, I'm thinking of really growing the femur into my socket, as if I feel that the femur starting at the knee has the ability to lengthen into the socket, and I'm really doing that mindfully. As I lengthen the femur into the socket, this hip tilt, that this pelvis which was rising up tends to naturally stabilize away from the rib cage, and this leg that was hanging, also the femur tends to get pulled into the socket as if we naturally arrive at a Tadasana. Again, I'll show you, because this one action where the femur aligns into the socket takes care of the hip tilt, takes care of the skewedness of the lumbar, takes care of the way the gluteus muscles are articulated. All of that happens. We have to be mindful of how the action is, because the action may not be elaborately visible on camera, but it's highly tangible. It can be truly felt. So, recognizing that I'm dropping my hip out on one side, hanging my hip down on the other side, having a pelvic tilt, shoulder is also tilted, lumbar is also compressed and lengthening on one end. This one aspect of throwing this hip out skews my entire body's alignment. So I'm only trying to correct the standing leg hip where the femur articulates well in the socket. For that, I'm bending my knee. I'm really thinking of the femur which connects on one end to the knee and on the other end to the hip. And I'm really trying to drive this femur up in the socket, up in the socket, up in the socket. As you can see, as that happens, the tilt of my pelvis is vanished. This leg that was hanging down is also pulled in the socket. My shoulders are even and my waistline is even. I naturally come to a Tadasana where I've attained the state of stability, where this looks very different from this, which we initially started with. So this femur positioning can drastically modify the way in which we visit or perform an asana. Now let's see how the same thing works while standing or starting for a standing pose. I'll show you Tadasana against the wall. I'm trying to stand with my heel towards the wall, and first when my heel stands or is placed properly where the back center of the heel touches the wall. In fact, if you have a wall without a skirting, it's even better. But I'm making the heel absolutely touch the wall. Center of the heel. By that I mean the heel in line with the Achilles tendon. The center of the heel touches the wall. When the center of the heel touches the wall, I'm able to naturally feel the position of the spine. That is, my shoulder touches the wall, the middle buttock, not the upper buttock, not the lower buttock. The middle buttock touches the wall, the back of the thigh doesn't touch the wall, the calf muscle touches the wall. So I'm just trying to make a reading. Now in this position, if I ask myself, is this the position in which the lumbar is at its longest? My answer will naturally be no. So in order to attain lumbar stability in its length, I obviously have to traction my pelvis down and I have to traction my rib cage up, which we will do. So slightly bending the knee, I release with my thumb forward, palms encasing the side of the pelvis and fingers back. I nicely position my lumbar away from my rib cage. So I'm really trying to draw it down, and my knees are now slightly bent, as you can see, to accommodate that pelvis's traction. Maintaining this, I then feel that my lumbar is now long against the wall. Where it was short, right? Where it was short, I'm now able to feel that the lumbar is longer on the wall as I traction my pelvis down. So I'm able to feel that transition. On the other side, I take my hand and I hold my hand up on the rope in such a way that when my right hand goes up, I'm able to tangibly feel the right rib cage ascending against that static wall. And when my left hand goes up, the left arm lifting the left rib cage, where I feel that the rib cage is now ascended to a new point. So my lumbar feels now even longer. Now in this position, you really have to think of sucking the femur up, way up into the socket away from the knee. I'm not really banging my knee back, and I'll show you why. Slightly internally rolling my thigh. I'm thinking that this femur ascends into the socket, ascends into the socket, ascends into the socket, where we now have a refined language where the spine is lengthened, the pelvis is stable, it really did not get dislodged at all while the femur was getting sucked high up into the socket. This should not be mistaken as an action of the knee, and I'll show you why. Suppose I bent my knee and I really tried to not suck the femur up the way it should be done. Rather, if I banged my knee back, it will completely dislodge the length of the lower back and create a tilted pelvis again. So, pelvic traction, ribcage traction, femur away from the knee into the hip, away from the knee into the socket, away from the knee into the socket, where the femur grows with a stable pelvis, lifted rib cage and a stable lumbar, not to bang the knee back. This is the way the femur regulates a healthy pelvis and a healthy spine. For this, in a standing pose, which we will elaborately do in another sequence. We are doing classes as well, right? So in the next class, I will deal with this in slightly greater detail. This is an ocean of a study. So in the next class, I'll visit this a little more. But when you stand for a standing pose, when you turn your foot out and you feel that this pelvis is attaining that skewed structure, we have to correct it. We can't proceed with Trikonasana or Parshvakonasana because here the spine is misaligned, and anything that you do with a misaligned spine is not going to be healthy for you. So in this position, you have to ensure that this outer groin comes first over the outer heel. That is, the outer ankle, outer knee, outer hip should be in line. So if the outer groin is forward, the outer hip is not in that line. You have to draw the outer groin back and keep the outer hip, outer knee and outer ankle in line. This rotationally, as I've already said, takes care of the spine and centers it. But still this hip tilt remains. For that, it's not about pushing the hip in. Because the moment I push the hip in, yes, this femur comes in, but this femur is thrown out. You see? This femur comes in, but this femur is thrown out. So we don't want to just push the hip in or sway the hips. Rather, we are thinking that from the knee end, we are lifting the femur in the socket, lifting the femur in the socket, lifting the femur in the socket, where this hip stability is naturally aligned through a beautifully articulated femur in the socket. And this controlled center of the spine should be the start for all your standing poses. More on this we will see in the upcoming classes.